And the only thing that I was really responding to as a kid was music. And it was a really big struggle because I was so insistent on, like, I caught, like when I caught the music bug, it was like, it was everything. It still is everything. And kind of to deal with that and then just have that be, like, oh yeah, great, this is something that you do, we're proud of you, like, for doing this thing. And now it's just like, what, you're just gonna keep doing this? Like, what? Like,
Yellow Chair Collective is a private practice that's now located in several states across America, but we need your help to spread the message of helping others gain awareness of their own mental health care and how they can better their own mindsets. And so if you really enjoyed this show, please give us a review and or share this with a friend that you know this can help. That's it, and let's listen to the episode. Josh Solomon is a session musician and a member of the band Young Lovers. In today's episode, you'll learn how family pressure can play a significant challenge for first-generation musicians and creatives, but how finding support in the music and creative community can help us navigate these challenges. He offers opportunities and validation for those who are looking for their own big breaks, and how his own physical challenges with carpal tunnel syndrome can be discouraging, and how he found other ways to play. The music industry can be tough and competitive, and in today's episode, you'll learn how to pivot from what makes sense into your passion without giving up entirely. This is Yellow Chair Collective, the podcast.
I've done a couple of tours in the past as well, but like mostly I'm local for at least this part.
Your sister connected us, Stephanie Bautista, and she was telling me that you did a ton of music, but I kind of want to start with how you started. So did you pick up guitar? Did you pick up audio? Were you a music nerd? How did you get started?
Well, it's actually because of her that I'm a musician, which is kind of fun. The thing was that she wanted to be a drummer, like back in high school, but our family didn't want any drums in the house. So her then boyfriend, now husband, bought her an electric bass, and I'm just like monkey see, monkey do. You always imitate your sibling. So I would play, because like I started playing guitar a little bit before that, but I really gravitated toward the bass because it looked cooler. And I always wanted an electric guitar, but our parents wouldn't let us get an electric guitar for the time being. So I ended up picking up the bass, but that, like, I guess my bass education really started in middle school because she actually suggested, like, oh yeah, if you connect with this instrument, maybe you can join the middle school orchestra. And so I started playing upright bass there, and then that's kind of how I got into the whole music thing. And yeah, like music was always just on. It was always in the background. I was pretty much raised, like, our family isn't, they aren't capital M musical. Like, they don't play instruments. Even our, extended family don't really play instruments. Apart from maybe my grandpa, who is said to have played violin at one point. But music was still very, important and present in the family. Like, I remember being a toddler and being in, one of those stand-up cribs, and they would just turn on, like VH1 or MTV, and then I would just be, like watching and listening, just like, I want to do that. That looks cool. So yeah, that's kind of how it all started.
So your sister wanted to be a musician first, but it kind of stuck out to you more. How far apart are you and Stephanie in age?
Yeah.
7 years?
About 7 years.
Okay. So she was 19 when she wanted to start playing.
Yeah, I would say a little bit less than, like she's always wanted to play. But the opportunities weren't quite there just yet. I mean, like her boyfriend basically like brute forced it and was like, here's an instrument and an amp. go
Yeah.
play.
What do you think it was about upright
So
bass that made you like stick to it? Because a lot of people who do orchestra in middle school, they just do it for the sake
mhm,
of doing it. But like, what was it about orchestra in middle
yeah.
school that made you stick to it?
Well, I mean, it was partly the like the availability and I think the
Mm.
translatability of the instrument because like I was playing guitar for a few years before that, and just like learning basic chords and things like that. Um, but you couldn't play guitar in the orchestra, so you had to do something else. And I was like, I guess like I remember me and my sister were talking about this, and she was like, oh yeah, like bass is like the first four strings of a guitar. So if you know how to do that, then maybe you can go play the upright bass. And I was like,
Wow.
okay, cool. I can continue studying this thing. And yeah, I just really gravitated towards it. And it was like a part of it was like a part of it was like I've always really liked a
Mm.
challenge. Like I've always really liked, you know, um, like being able to do things that may not be quite expected. Because I, by the time I got into middle school, I barely broke 5 feet.
That's
and,
relatable. We're both Filipino, so I get
yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. You know, but here's this big old
Mm.
bass, and the only one that they had available when I joined the orchestra like was the full size
Wow.
one, and usually they'll give you the 3/4 size one. So I was actually like I started playing bass like standing on a chair,
Wow.
and then just doing all that and learning, and I took to it really well, and I think a large part of that was the
Mm.
challenge of doing that. Our family isn't really like we don't really have a background in like classical music
Mm.
at all. But it was a cool way to just like get into playing
Yeah.
music like at the time and like in earnest and in like an organized
Mm.
setting. So yeah, it was that, and just the physicality of the instrument is really cool because it's like at that point it was way bigger than me. It still is way bigger than me, even though I actually unfortunately don't play upright bass anymore because of some
Oh.
hand issues. But um but it's the physicality of like like the low end really like booming, you feel it, it's a very like visceral
Mm.
experience. So yeah, and it was from there I just kind of like took it, and I'm still doing it all these years
Yeah,
later
I'm
anyway.
curious about that because sometimes when it
Hmm.
comes to things that are really difficult, like music, the barrier to entry is really
Yeah.
hard. And so
Yeah,
I'm curious about
absolutely.
whether or not you encountered any difficulties mentally, like continuing on as a musician. Tell me
Hmm.
about those.
Yeah, I mean it's a constant thing, really. Um, I mean, in the first place is kind of the like the stereotypical like first gen immigrant family
Yeah.
thing of just like, oh yeah, like it's funny because as a kid they'll really push you to learn
Hmm.
these things, or like they'll push you to learn music, they'll push you to be interested in athletics or art, drawing, movies, that kind of thing. But then at some point there's a point where that's just flat out not acceptable for like for for a good number of families, and my family was like that as well. So there was a huge thing because like I wasn't particularly um I wasn't particularly athletically inclined. I was pretty good at academics. Like I could maintain a good average and look good for like colleges and things like that, but I wasn't really like particularly invested
Mm.
in it. And the only thing that I was really responding to as a kid was music, and it was a really big struggle because I was so insistent on like I caught like when I caught the music bug, like it was everything, it still is
Wow.
everything. And kind of to deal with that and then just have that be like, oh yeah, great, this is something that you do, we're proud of you like for doing this thing. And now it's just like, what, you're just going to keep doing this?
Wow.
Like what? Like we're like you got to get serious, you got to get real, you got to get
Wow.
all that stuff. Do you know how hard it is? Do you know how, like, all these things, how much the odds are stacked against you. You have to be the best in order to do this. And, there's a really small chance of you doing it. And, all that stuff. And on top of, you know, like parents obviously, like they obviously want the best for you. They want something that'll, you know, that'll like financially sustain you and financially sustain the entire
Mm,
family and and all that stuff. So there's a ton of pressure
yeah.
on you at that point.
We interrupt the regularly scheduled programming to introduce you to Yellow Chair Collective's upcoming event highlights, where we're bringing you to the best in mental health, wellness, and community engagement. Here's what we have lined up for you. First up, don't miss the second installment of the AARP and AAPI Idea Talk series. This virtual event is all about achieving work-life harmony and wellness. Join us as mental health professionals and caregivers share their personal stories and experiences, offering valuable insights and resources for mental health support. Our co-founder, Sujin Lee, will be on the panel. This event is going to be in the link description below. Event number 2 is our Health and Healing Professionals Networking event. It's happening on Saturday, September 21st, and head to the Brookside Park in Pasadena for our Health and Healing Professionals Networking event. This is hosted by Yellow Chair Collective. This is your chance to connect with like-minded individuals in health and wellness, exchange ideas, establish valuable connections, and engage with fellow professionals who share your passion for health and healing. This event runs from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. with light snacks and refreshments provided. The link will be in the description down below. Event number 3. On September 10th, 2024, Yellow Chair Collective is hosting an author event with Susan Liu, a special occasion for our monthly Asian American Mental Health Book Club. We'll be hosting an online conversation with Vietnamese American author, playwright, and performer Susan Liu discussing her memoir, The Manicurist's Daughter. This event is a must for anyone interested in exploring Asian American identity and mental health themes in a supportive community setting. The event will take place via Zoom from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Don't miss this opportunity to engage with a talented, insightful author. That's it, and let's get back to the regularly scheduled programming.
I think like there were a lot of like there was definitely like a lot of tension
Mm.
and and a lot of strife both in my immediate family and my extended
It
family
It's
for
so
that matter.
interesting because I can relate as a Filipina, as a first gen Filipino
Hmm.
American, and you're
Yeah,
not the oldest. And so it sounds like the pressure was kind of present for all of the siblings. And
totally.
I
Yeah.
I can see how confusing that must have been for you to be encouraged to pursue music and to pursue that hobby for most of your childhood. But as soon as you
Hmm.
reach 18, it's time to quote, be a real man. And so like
Totally. Yeah.
knowing that Yellow Chair Collective is for a lot of Asian Americans, like creatives do listen to this as well.
Mm.
Like, what was the mindset for you as like, I'm assuming someone that was scared to like disobey their parents and like loved his parents. Like, how did you deal with that pressure from them?
Yeah, I think, it was really tough to like to deal with the pressure because again, there's that sort of communication
Mm,
barrier and there's that sort of experience of growing up in a place like the US or specifically
mm,
LA. And, growing up in a world where that is acceptable for other kids, but it's very much not acceptable
wow.
for you. And that kind of and like navigating that was really like it was really tough and I had to really lean on um you know uh, just like your chosen family. And for me, my chosen family was other
Mm,
musicians, and it was kind of where you kind of had to figure that out for
mm,
yourself, at least for all of us. Because like not only was it like a cultural thing, but economically I was like going to public school. We were playing on like LUSD public school instruments with like instructors who were you know running themselves into the
mm-hmm,
ground trying to like trying to support themselves and support the whole thing. So a lot of that, like what really came out of that environment where, if something broke, you had to fix it
Mm-hmm.
yourself. If, like if you were feeling a certain type of way, you had to find somebody out there to give you
Yeah.
support. And sometimes that was there, sometimes that wasn't. Sometimes your friends were there, and sometimes, you got split up for for whatever reason. But a lot of that really, I think the way that I dealt with it was being very like
Mm-hmm.
self-reliant. I found myself more in the DIY spheres of making music. So if there wasn't a place to play, which there really wasn't unless you knew
Yeah.
somebody who was booking at venues, we would have to do house shows. Like if you didn't know anybody who was doing recording stuff, you'd have to be like, hey, uh I know that guy has, or this guy I know has recording equipment. Maybe we can, ask him if we can use it for a night. And then, and then it just kind of it kind of snowballs from there. But we really had to figure it out. And I think for all the musicians that I grew up with, it was really that community, because we all kind of had that shared experience where it was just like, okay, some something or multiple things in our society and our culture really does not want us to do
Mm.
this, but we feel very, very deeply that it's essential to, to our way of living, to the way that we want to live our lives. And it's essential to us as, as humans. And that's important enough to us collectively. And as long as we know that between each other in this community, then we can support each other, nearly
Wow.
unconditionally, because it's a very deep rooted
Mm-hmm.
thing. You don't like the environment, at least out here. It's, you don't do this if you don't, the cliche is you love it so that you do it. And then that's right for exploitation and things like that, but that's another conversation. But when when it comes to recognizing that sort of love and importance for this thing that you do, that you've found kind of an important piece of your identity in, and that's held you up and, given you strength and has given everybody around you a lot of strength, then recognizing that and supporting each other through it was definitely the thing that really, kept me going in music, but also just kept me going as a person.
Mm.
Because that's such a it's such a powerful thing to be able to find yourself in that kind of community. And, you know and music communities can be very volatile, and they can, they can form and then they can break up, and then other things will form and then they'll break up again. So it becomes a challenge to try to keep that up and keep those, kind of those core things
Yeah.
straight. And just be like, no, if we're here and we're together and we're making music and we're trying to make it happen, then we're here for
That's
each other.
wonderful. I think it's really rare to
Yeah.
find true friends like that, especially in the creative industry and especially in something as cutthroat
Yeah.
as music. And so I
Yeah,
want to transition
absolutely.
into, do you remember your first big break? Like, and what was it?
Yeah. It was with a band that I'm still
Hmm.
currently in. Band's name is Young Lovers, and we've been together since I've been in
Wow.
high school.
How'd you meet?
And it was in high school.
Orchestra?
We were no, not in the orchestra, but in the
Mm.
band, or in
Yeah.
the marching band. I met who was eventually going to be the guitarist in the band. Uh, he was playing bass inside, in the marching band, and I played bass too. So we were like, hi, what are we gonna do about this? And then it was a really funny moment, because the entire band gathered around, and they were like, bass battle, bass battle,
Whoa.
bass battle. And we were like, what do we do?
You were in ninth
So
grade when this was all
we
going
started
on?
playing.
Wow.
Yeah, I was in the ninth grade, but he was a senior
Mm.
at that time. And So like that whole thing happened, and then we became like pretty much instant friends from that point on. But he graduated, and then I was kind of left with like, okay, like what do I do? And then I found him. He was playing, or like it's either he was playing or he was going to a house show nearby, and I was like, oh, like I'll go visit Mikey.
Mm.
and and then when I went to go visit him, like I got proposed by him and like who was to be our drummer at the time, to start a new band, and then that's kind of how it all happened. And then we went the whole DIY route in terms of like recording and making albums. We rented out a
Wow.
studio, um, and I still have that studio. It's like
No
just down
way.
the street. We've been renting it out ever
What's the
since,
studio
and
called?
um, it's just like it's our practice studio. It's really a rehearsal space. We don't really record out of there
Mm.
anymore, just because of the just the logistics of it. But we do now record over at a studio, which also started as like a DIY operation called Balboa
Wow.
Recording Studio, and I interned there for a little bit and worked there and stuff. But yeah, we recorded it entirely on like our first release entirely on friends, like equipment that was there, and we were playing shows like it followed the whole like, okay, first you play house shows for like two people, and then you play you know you do music venues and stuff like that, and it just kind of ballooned. And then out of nowhere, I think on a Facebook request, we got requested to play with to open for this band called the Fall of
Mm.
Troy, and this was at the Glass House in
Whoa.
Pomona. And we were like, oh my god, this is the biggest show we've ever played. And then we go there, we play, like we get to the show, and it's like, it's a 900 cap
Wow.
venue, sold
Wow.
out, like sold out. But the thing was that like nobody knew who we
Yeah.
were, and so it was like, oh god, like what are we gonna do? And then we played it, and it ended up being like this whole like thing, and we wouldn't stop hearing about it for like even years afterwards. They were like, oh yeah, I was at that show,
Wow.
like that was so amazing, and like I bought a shirt off of you, can you sign this? And I'm like, I'm just all right.
What was that show like? Do you
That kind
remember?
of thing.
Like the nerves, how the
Yeah.
show went?
Oh my god. Yeah, no, I totally had like an 8 Mile
Wow.
moment in the like in the bathroom, where it was just like looking at yourself in the mirror, and you're just like, oh man, I feel like I'm gonna throw up, and like it's it's like just the like it's like lose
Yes.
yourself happening in real time. Like, whoa, this is like a real thing. Like
Yes.
I get to do this, and I think um and the show went
Mm.
fantastic. I wasn't really sure how it would translate to like to a crowd that we've never played in front of. But I think it was a really emotional thing to go through, because like as I mentioned earlier, it was like all of this stuff. If it was up to everybody else externally, we wouldn't be
How
there.
did you get that
Like
opportunity?
we just
Just how did they find you
yeah.
on a Facebook request?
Yeah, it was like they put on an open call of like, oh yeah, like we're really returning to our local DIY
Mm.
roots. So on this next tour, we want only local bands to open up
Wow.
for us. And we were just like, hey, like we're a local DIY band. And I think our drummer at the time had submitted it was just like, hey, like here's our album. And then they listened to it, and they're like, no, it's got to be you
Wow.
guys. Like it has to be you guys. And so that was a huge honor. But I think the thing that made it like really special is that it was a huge
Mm.
affirmation of like, because like we had already been through a lot as a band, and like as people leading up to that, and like literally just building it from the ground up. Like we didn't have any like real connections out here. We were you know kind of sequestered all the way like over in the valley. And like we had to do all the legwork. We had to do a lot of convincing. We had to do a lot of just like stuff to keep it
Mm.
alive. And for it to kind of happen at that, uh like in that setting was just like so important, and to have people react to it as like as viscerally as they did was really really great. We still have friends that we met at that show. Actually, one of the people that we met at that show ended up, or like, is now our current
Wow.
drummer. So it's
That's pretty incredible.
things just, yeah, so things just kind of, it was like it really gave us a lot of it really gave us a lot of
Mm.
hope, I think, for the future. And and it really, that was like kind of my first taste of like, oh yeah, it it's as much, if not more, about like opportunity and like getting a chance to do
Mm.
that, and like being given the chance through some form or another, than it is like really about, like quality. I mean, like we had been delivering like really quality shows for
How
years
old were
before
you when
that.
that happened?
And oh my god, how old was I when that happened? That was, I think that was it 2014.
That was 10 years ago?
2014, and then I was, yeah, it was 10 years ago. And I think I was just, I might have just turned 20, or I might have still been 19 at that moment.
Wow.
And yeah, so it was like the biggest experience. And then, like every single time I got to go out and play to crowds, like even bigger than that, and have like all these opportunities, it still has like it feels that important
Mm.
still, just because of everything that you have to do in order to keep this thing
Mm.
alive.
Yeah, it's speaking of, that happened 10 years ago, you're still going. I kind of
Hmm.
want to
Yeah.
marry the beginning of your story to the middle and now to the current.
Hmm.
So you talk about
Yeah.
being part of a first generation Filipino American family, going against what your parents'
Hmm.
wishes for you to find a quote real
Yeah.
job, the affirmation of
Totally.
getting the glass house in Pomona, and then being able to
Hmm.
have some sort of validity in all the work that you've been doing for the last like
Yeah.
decades, I'll say. Um,
Hmm.
do family pressures still play a role, or has that shifted or changed since you were 18?
I think I think it has shifted somewhat.
Still there?
Um, like I'm not. Yeah, I would say it's
Okay.
still there. But I think, like, honestly, just through sheer stubbornness, and just, like, okay, like, this is what I'm doing today. This is what I'm, but like you say that every single
Yeah.
day. It's like, okay, I'm doing this today. Like my life is going in this direction
Mm.
today.
One day at a time.
And I think, yeah, yeah. And I think I don't think it was really one particular moment where it was like, okay, like, we understand. Because like to like I think I've kind of come to a sort of acceptance that, like, that it wasn't going to be like, there's always going to be a little bit of that disconnect. There's always going to be a little bit of that, like, oh yeah, like, why are you doing this, and why are you sticking with this, even though, like, I know they can tell that it takes a
Mhm.
toll. Like it takes a huge toll,
Mentally, physically?
just to, like, mentally and
Yeah.
physically. I mean, like, physically there have been like a ton of challenges. I've
The
alluded
hand.
to,
Yeah.
like, my hand. Yeah, the hand, which is why I can't play upright bass anymore. And like I almost, like, and this happened in college. Like I almost flat out just stopped
Really?
playing,
What happened?
because yeah, because I got carpal tunnel syndrome.
Man.
But it's like particularly devastating for, like, guitarists and bassists, because like your hand literally just doesn't work
Wow.
right. Like whatever commands that you make to, like, open and close your hands, after a while, if it's like in its more advanced stages, it just doesn't,
Wow.
like, happen, because the muscles literally just don't have the right information
Wow, Josh.
to be given. And so they, yeah, so like my hand, like I played recently with the Filipino American Symphony
Wow.
Orchestra, over at Disney Hall. And like a lot of the upright bass players were like, well, why don't you play upright bass? And I was like, well, like, show me your hand, I'll show you mine.
Mm.
And their hands over here are way more developed, they're much more muscular, whereas mine, you can actually see a
Wow.
mark where, like, where everything just
Yeah.
stops. So so yeah, like that was a huge thing. And I remember being like incredibly just, distraught over that. But yeah, I mean, like, getting back to, just like finding it, like, like, is there still that pressure? I mean, like, absolutely. Like I would say that there's, like, it's like, the fact that I'm doing this and pursuing music is more of, it's just that it's a
Mm.
fact. I treat it as fact. I treat it as like that much a part of my life. But I would also say just the, like, the landscape of, uh, like, being a creative, like being an artist, being a musician. It's tough. Like, it's really, really tough now. And we've all had to like pivot and do, like, like, find our own ways within it. And that's, like, I would say that's as much of a pressure as, like, as any, like, especially
In
especially
Los
here.
Angeles,
Like,
yeah.
it's
Well, I
yeah, yeah,
well,
especially
you,
here, it's
I
tough.
want to go back to what you said about college because I feel like a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people wouldn't know that about you. Like they would see that you're
Mm,
still playing in a band since high school, um, and
yeah.
so I want to express gratitude for revealing what you just revealed about carpal tunnel syndrome.
Oh.
But I want to get to the middle of that story of like what got you to
Mm-hmm.
keep playing music despite wanting
Yeah.
to give up because I'm assuming that must have been extremely
Mm-hmm.
discouraging.
Yeah. Yeah. It was really the one thing that I had, like, dedicated myself to
Yeah.
for, like, from like a young enough age where it just becomes a
Yeah.
part of you. You know how they always say, like, oh yeah, you have to start them young in order for, a tennis player to reach a
Hmm.
grand slam or something like that, or else it's not going to happen like otherwise. So that was kind of the route that I put myself on, and I put so much of my identity into how I play music, how I do this, that when it all happened, it was just like I had to really face all of that, where it was just like, and it was an extremely scary point in my life, because I was like, well, I I did the whole thing where I dedicated myself so singularly
You
to this
did.
one thing that I don't know what else I don't know what else I have.
Must have been
Like,
scary.
and that was, yeah, yeah, it was like, it was really, really scary. And when I went to college, I just had to pivot away
Really?
from it, and I had to go to, um like, I tried, like, I have my degree from CSUN in music
Mm.
industry, like, as a result, because I was like, maybe there's something else in there that I might be good at. And while I kind of put this on the shelf, or, I, like, either put it on the shelf or give it up entirely. And then while I was going through that program, kind of every step of it, I was like, well, I'd rather be playing.
Wow.
I'd rather be playing. I'd rather be playing. And it was just this, like, it was this tremendously difficult thing, because I was like, I don't know how not to, I don't know how not to do
That's so
this.
cool how you kept
Like,
coming back.
and
Let I do
yeah.
feel something that I need to ask you because
Hmm.
um, our story is a little bit different. If I'm allowed to be a little vulnerable,
Hmm.
so I've been
Yeah,
playing guitar since I was 7,
absolutely.
and
Hmm.
I love it. I actually have a Yamaha Red Label guitar right next to my
Nice.
desk. But when my parents had that conversation with me about like you have to be
Hmm.
practical, you have to find something, I
Hmm.
ended up choosing the route of a therapist because of one of two things. Like
Hmm.
one, I love this
Yeah.
job and I love that I get to talk to you
Yeah.
and do this. But now as an
Totally.
adult, like in her late 20s, one of the things that I wish I would have kept is I wish I didn't put the instrument down. And I want to recognize just the thread of your
Hmm.
story is a devout stubbornness to keep doing what he loves doing. And so I don't know if you
Yeah.
encounter people like me who have put down their instrument and feel a sense of like discouragement, but like
Totally.
what advice would you give someone like me who has picked up an instrument
Hmm.
before but feels like they're too late in starting?
Yeah, that's actually like a very good question because I do still
Oh
work as a
yeah,
teacher. I work as a like as a private music teacher. I used to teach in
that's
actually in
so
public
cool.
school for like younger kids. But now that I do it privately, I teach older
Yeah.
folks as well. And older meaning just like not a kid.
Anyone above
Um,
18.
and yeah, yeah, anybody above 18 is fine. But I would say that it's I don't think you know I think we would have to examine what too late
Mm,
means as
now
like
you're
as a
playing therapist.
phrase,
That's good.
like what yeah,
That's awesome.
exactly. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, what like is it too late for skill? Is it too late for like developing, like crazy
Hmm.
chops? Like is it too late for this whole thing? And I guess my answer to that would be like, you know, when you come to music at any level, be it from like a beginner level to like an intermediate level to an advanced level. And when we're talking about level, we're just talking about, skill and virtuosity and things like that. But at any of those levels, you can experience literally the best that music can
Wow.
give you, which is like of like a mode of expression, like a mode of very
That's
true
good.
expression. And that can happen if you've been playing the instrument for a long
Mm.
time. And that can also happen if you just pick up your guitar
Mm.
now. Like if you play something and then you have that sort of emotional connection to it, no matter how it sounds, you know. And sometimes when you play something and it doesn't quite sound right, but you feel like there's something true in it, that's what it
Mm.
is. Like that's what we're at any level, that's what you're searching
That's so
for.
good.
And I think it would be, and to be able to experience that, yeah, I mean, particularly when you're older, I feel like there's so much of an appreciation for
Mm.
that it's like, oh my, like i I've found it. Even after all these years, it's
Mm.
still there. And I find that doesn't go away with
No,
age. In fact, I feel like it gets better
it
even,
does get better.
like, yeah, even with age. And I think, even from my like experience, as long as I've been playing the instrument, I think especially this year, I'm approaching this I'm approaching that
Really?
again, where I had, kind of like had let so many things get in the
Mm.
way of that, and that I was feeling kind of lost on
Yeah.
the instrument. I'm feeling like I'm saying something more true on my instrument now, I think more than
Mm.
ever.
What does that mean? Like being able
And
to have a sense of creative liberty or new spark in the relationship?
I would say those are kind of like
Yeah.
symptoms of it, but I think it's really just the fact that like reconciling myself with the fact that I have my own
Wow.
voice, and that I like my
That's
own
good.
voice, and that I have something to say. Because you can be an incredibly talented instrumentalist, and then still kind of be searching for years even. And whereas that can be true, and it can also be true that somebody who just picks up like a keyboard or something and then makes something, and they're like, oh, I don't know what I made, but it feels great, that's always
Yeah.
possible, like with it. And I think I'm getting back to that
Yeah.
now. And so, like, even like, no matter like how long you've been like at the instrument, is almost like, you know it's almost a moot
Mm.
point. It's like what value does that have, like, for your life as a human being? And like how, you know what do you feel when you really express yourself to it, when you're like 100%, like truly 100% vulnerable on
Mm.
it, and then you do that, and it's something, it's
It is
special.
really special. I I
Yeah.
remember when I was at Best Buy, my dad and I was like 5 years old. We're passing by the CD section when they used to have a CD section,
Hmm.
and there was a
Oh
picture
yeah.
of it. We
Glory
got to the
days.
J, and it was like John
Hmm.
Lennon's photo. And my dad
Yeah.
points to the John Lennon photo, and he's like, that's my man. That's John Lennon. And I look at him and I go, Dad,
Hmm.
who's John Lennon? And he gets so mad. He buys the
You're
CD and then he
right.
also goes to the B section for the Beatles and he buys the One
Yeah.
album. So all of their greatest hits.
Oh yeah.
So he
Hmm.
plays it to me
Yeah.
and he starts telling me how old he was when he listened to the song, where he was in the
Hmm.
Philippines, what he was doing.
Yeah.
And it was the
Yeah.
beginning of like my music education from my dad. And then the next
Oh
day,
man, what a place
he
to start.
buys me a
Yeah.
$30 starter guitar from Target. And it's like nylon strings,
Yeah.
like super cheap, but I
Hmm.
still have
Yeah.
it in my parents' house when I go
Totally.
visit them. But
Yeah.
like something so beautiful about like connecting to an instrument and just having something
Hmm.
to express yourself when you're having a hard day at school, but or
Yeah.
things like that. But I'm curious about. I think what you just said, Josh, really does apply to every other person's career or art, whether it's film,
Hmm.
like a therapy practice, or even what they're doing at their job. You said that you found
Hmm.
something to say and you found your voice again. And I feel like that's
Yeah.
something that a lot of people don't talk about, where we go in and
Hmm.
out of love with the things that we do. And but like sticking through it really does make a difference. So tell me about how you got there, like how you fell out of it and how you came back.
Yeah. Yeah, I think because really my falling out of it happens in like in college because I'm literally like I'm physically
Yeah.
incapable of doing this thing. And so that's, like no matter how hard I would want to try to get back to it, it just wouldn't like the more that I would do it, the worse it would be for my actual
Mm,
physical health.
yeah.
And so like I had to like it was one of those things where you have to do the one thing that you don't
Which
want to
is
do in order to get to where you want to go, which is take a break.
mm,
Like
that's
which
good.
is, find yeah, like find, you know, and I think through the whole thing I really had to reconcile myself with the idea that maybe I'd been pushing too hard. Maybe I'd been holding on to it too tightly
Wow.
for all these years. And by loosening my grip on it, I could let it breathe. And that I could, like let it heal, let it, do what it needed to
Mm,
do. And that was just something that like I continually struggle with that in, like in a lot of aspects of my life. And just going through that and really like looking at my own relationship to music and also my own relationship to my own
mm,
identity. um and that kind of extended, I guess into this current part of my current like part of my career where I have I like this coming back to it kind of like coincides with a sort of like I don't want to say like a change in musical
mm,
style, but like I really wanted to look back. I found like this like really compelling motivation to come back because I looked back at like all the music that I loved as a
mm.
kid and all the music that I loved when I first was listening to music. And so like it's a like it's a common thing, you come back to it to kind of give you
Yeah.
strength and to kind of give you like to remind you what it was like when you were first really like falling in love with the whole
That's
thing.
good.
And when I looked at that, it was like to be like completely straight up, it was literally the music on
Yes.
94.7 The
Uh-huh.
Wave in the late 90s.
94.7
And
the
the
way.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that
I
that
know
whole
it.
thing. And yeah, and I revisited so much of that music after spending so much time
That's
away
cool.
from it and like doing a lot of like indie rock stuff and doing like playing in that entire circuit. And then the more that I looked at a lot of that, the more I was like, oh, like I found this other facet of my musical identity that I feel like I'd been trying to work into everything, but had never really
Mm,
gotten the opportunity to. So I think like in getting to this like later, I guess, present stage of my career, in embracing that and in like really taking a listen to like a lot of what my folks were listening to like when I was growing up, which also includes a lot of, like OPM, like Alpha
Yeah.
Hiking
Original
Society and
Filipino
like
music
VST
for
and
those of you who don't know
Company.
what OPM is.
Yes. Yes. And like it was all that, but it was also a lot of the stuff that I was hearing, like just out on the street, like a lot of funk music, a lot of R&B music, a lot of hip
Mm,
hop music, and kind of like making that my, or like at least coming back to that gave me a lot of, like, it really strengthened kind of my sense of
wow,
identity and something to hold on to. And especially in the, like, in the music world, things come and go
they
very,
do.
very quickly. And I guess like a lot of the directive when you're in a studio session or in a writing session is just like, okay, like what's hot right now? Like what's, like what's going to move the needle? Like what trends do we have to hop on and everything? And after so many of those, you kind of get like, well, like we can keep
Yeah.
doing this, and like we might be able to make something good, but it's always been like the best studio sessions, the best groups that I've been in have been able to be like, no, but like what do we
Oh.
really connect with, like what really moves us. And for me, finding my way back to that really kind of, it gave me like a huge
Mm,
second wind. And I can definitely credit that with kind of where I am today in doing a lot of like the session, the live stuff, and even into like my newer projects where like I'm doing bass covers on social media and stuff like that, and just like kind of highlighting all this music that I'm like
so cool.
into. you
So
know
cool. One of my favorite music artists right now is Still Woozy. Have you heard of him?
mm. Actually, I
Still
haven't.
Woozy, he has a lot of like ambient sounds embedded under his music,
Hmm.
and it's kind of like a mix of
Yeah.
lo-fi and have you heard of Slender Bodies? It's kind
Yes,
of like a
yes,
mix of
yeah, I
like
have.
ASMR meets like
Mm. Huh.
ambience,
Interesting. Yeah.
and then he layers it on top of a really soft
Hmm.
voice. So that do 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 do
Yeah.
do, and then on top of that you hear like someone's like ASMR,
Yeah.
like whisper on top of it. So it's
Gotcha.
very interesting.
Yeah.
I love hearing you talk about the different blending that you're doing, but I also want to acknowledge,
Hmm.
like when you talk about music, it really is like a kid in a candy store. Like your eyes light up and you look so
Yeah.
excited. I meet so many creatives who love what they do, but they allow the
Mm.
anxiety and pressure of what other people want from them, and like the squeezing, to your point, of like the financials
Totally.
to get in the way of what they
Yeah.
do. And
Yeah.
so for folks that are in
Hmm.
creative and are allowing the anxiety to mask them, like how do you get to that place where, like similar to what you're displaying right now, there's like a purity to
Hmm.
what you're talking about?
Yeah. It's like, it's a place where like everybody kind of like everybody goes on their own journeys, and like everybody's subject to some kind of like difficulty,
Correct.
obstacles in the road, and things like that. And I always find that like still being in touch with like really the raw thing that makes
Mm,
you like on a very basic level react to like to a piece of music, like whether or not it makes you feel happy, sad, or something like that, something that makes you feel like very, very visceral about it, and looking at it. And I think like in the professional world, I see a lot of people like looking at these things as things to like exploit, and things to like, oh, how can I use that, how can I
hmm.
do this? And then like after a while, that's kind of like, if you're looking at everything as to like, oh, how can I use this and take advantage of
Mm,
it? I think it's I think it's helpful to kind of take a step back and like look at it with a sense of awe,
that's good.
like wow, this made me, like this
How
made
did
me
it make
feel
you feel?
something that's
That's good.
important. Yeah, like how did it
That's
make
good.
me feel? And you kind of like deconstruct that, like on the way, but like looking at it as something that's like wonderful about
Mm,
life, like something that, like, because when we play music, and especially for like for non-musicians, just for listeners, it's like
Yeah.
magic, it's just in the air. You feel something to it. It
Spiritual.
changes something about your mental. Yeah, it's spiritual. Like it changes something about the mental atmosphere, and being able to do that, like being
That's so
able
good.
to like being able to not only listen but to
That's
recreate
good.
that is one of the great, like it's one of the great privileges of being a human being, I think. And when and it's funny that you mentioned that, because all of my favorite producers that I've ever worked with, and I've had, like the pleasure of working with some of
Wow.
my heroes, like growing up,
So cool.
and I'll get into the studio with them, and they're the exact same way. Like when they when they hit a certain chord or they make a certain thing, they'll like you'll see the light,
Oh my gosh,
like
that's so
happen in
cool.
their eyes. Like you'll see them become
That's
little
so
kids
cool.
again. And it's not like this, everybody's got shades on and then it's like, yeah, that's the take, man. Like it's not, it's like it's not like the
Yes, yes,
Portlandia
yes.
sketcher or anything like that. But with a lot of like these folks that have kind of stood the, like the test of time and have like really stuck with it. They've figured out how to maintain that sort of that like childlike appreciation for music, when like no matter when they're
Mm.
creating music or if they're just listening to it. Like there's this like I've recently had the like the pleasure and the honor to work with Leon Silvers
Wow.
the third, who is from the group The Silvers, and he wrote a lot of like the like hits for the
That's
Whispers,
so
Shalimar,
cool.
um, all that, like LA funk stuff from the 80s, which happens to be like some of
That's
my
so
favorite
cool.
music. And I got to work with him, and I still get to work with him. We still, like keep in
That's
touch, and we
awesome.
still work on stuff from time to time. And there was this one moment where like I picked him up from his house in my 1991 Honda Accord, which is just
It's
like,
still running to this
it's got
day?
like dents in it.
That's
Oh, it's still
awesome. Honda
running.
for
It's
the win.
yeah.
Hashtag Toyota.
Um,
I have a Toyota.
yeah. Oh yeah. Um, but like we were both just like in the car, and I, like I live my daily life in this car. I go and get groceries in this car. Like I go do, like my normal everyday stuff, and then like right next to
Mm.
me is like literally one of my heroes, and I'm just like driving him to the studio, and like I'm just like, oh my god, this is so cool, this is really sick. And then I put on what is it, Victoria Monet's most recent
Mm.
album, Jaguar
Victoria
2,
Monet. I don't think I know
maybe.
Victoria Monet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, highly
Okay.
recommend if you're if you're into a lot of just like very well orchestrated
Yeah.
R&B, very classic
Mm.
songwriting. Um and like I put that album on, and there's like I forget which song it was, but we both looked like like the What Is Love
Mm.
guys from, the What Is Love, dun, 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 dun. And then we were both like doing that driving down, like the 134 getting over to like getting
Yes.
over to the studio. But it was just, and it was really cool to see that, because we were both like very much present with the music in the
That's
same
so
way.
cool.
Like, and it felt like I was in high school again. And I just like threw on like my favorite album, and then my friend was like, "Oh man, this is sick!" And then we're both
Mm.
just going crazy over it. But yeah, that's something that I think is really important to keep with
Mm.
you, is just that like that base relationship to music as something that is like beautiful
That's
in your
so
life.
beautiful, Josh.
and
I'm gonna actually interview
and
your
yeah.
sister in half an hour, her and Ariel. So I do
Oh
have to
yeah.
go and prep for that
Nice.
interview. But
Yeah,
I had so
totally.
much fun talking to you because,
Yeah,
like,
likewise.
with the amount of experience that you have and with the amount of people I've interviewed, there's almost like an elevated confidence in everyone that I talk to because of
Hmm.
their expertise. But like, you're the first
Yeah.
person I've interviewed where I feel like there's still the joy of what he does. Like, for
Mm.
I feel like when you talk about it, it's like I'm experiencing it through your eyes. And it almost feels
Oh
like
wow, thank you.
Christmas when you talk about it. Like, it's like a present for you every single day. And it just shows like the
Yeah.
purity and the joy that you do and the work that you do. And I think it's so rare to find. And so, like, I'm just really
Oh, thank
grateful.
you. That really means a
Seriously,
lot.
like the amount of
Yeah.
humility that you have with the amount of experience and the amount of opportunities you've gotten to work for is just
Mhm.
so cool. So I'm grateful that I met you, and hopefully I can interview you more because there's tons more questions I have. So I wish we did have more
Yeah,
time, but
absolutely.
need to let you go
Yeah.
now. One last question for you.
Mhm.
If
Yeah.
you could talk to a musician that's listening right now who's experiencing a lot of discouragement, what advice
Mhm.
would you give them? Let's say he's like 13, where you were at,
Yeah.
starting out,
Yeah.
struggling with comparison.
Totally. Oh, struggling with
Mm-hmm.
comparison. Oh my God. Yeah, that's yeah, that's a huge one. I would say, you know, like, well, one, keep
Mm.
going. But but elaborating on that is that it is like it's very, very important to like for you to keep going and for you as a person, and it's important for everybody that you keep
Mm.
going. And not only and like and I don't say that in a sort of like I'm going to put pressure on you way, but that it's like it's a very beautiful and rare thing that you
Mm.
do. And in whatever form that it takes right now is, just as important as, like the place where you want it to
Mm.
be is, because sometimes it's like, I can't play this the way that I want it to, like want it to sound. I can't do this, um, to the standard that I want, like to the standard that I think other people expect of me. I can't do it to the standard of the person that I'm comparing myself to. But I guess if, like if I had to say anything, it's just like the way that you play now is just as
That's
important,
good.
and it's just as beautiful as, like when you play down the line. And, it might not feel like that now, but if you're still doing this in, you know, even 4 or 5 years, and you take a listen back to yourself, and, of course it's going to be like, oh, like I used to suck. I used to, I can't believe my form. I can't, like I was so out of tune and stuff like that. But if you look at it, you've like, you've preserved a part of your
That's
life.
good.
Like that's, and you can look back on that and be
Mm.
proud of that. And you'll probably realize somewhere down the line that maybe you liked that
Mm.
person when, like, after all. And even if you don't now, I promise you that, like, by doing this, by making something beautiful out of it now, by trying, just by trying, that like, you'll be able to really, I don't know, just like love that
Mm.
person.
That's good. Josh, I'm thankful for you.
Yeah.
All
And I'm
right.
thankful for you
Got
too.
to let you go now because I do have an interview
For
to
sure.
prep for in 25 minutes, but I
Mm-hmm.
appreciate you and I'll invite you on again because this was so
Yeah,
fun. All right,
absolutely.
Josh.
Yeah. Yeah.
See
You
you
just let me
later.
know when.
Bye.
All right. See you.